few weeks ago I was part of a debate on another social media site. This was after someone complained about being part of a minyan that went too fast for him. I'd like to use the video opportunity to comment on this because I'm not a typist. It would take me too long, but as a talker I can range quite freely on the subject and throw in my thoughts. I'm not an expert on the subject, just offering some humble opinions, but anyone who does have questions, certainly I invite your feedback. If I can't help you directly, I can give you some other references that will help you. Let me say in general, my feeling is that when you say someone davens too fast, it's all a relative issue. After all, anyone who says that someone davens too fast means that they are davening faster than them, and anyone who davens slower than them can be said to be davening too slow. There's no absolute answer as to what is the right speed. It's more a question of one's intent, but I'll cover that and a few other topics. You have to realize that anyone who davens 3 times a day in the course of a year will be saying certain prayers or segments thereof over 1100 times. That certainly should bring a great deal of familiarity to the words. The question remains though as to the understanding of those words, and to throw it into another context, imagine that you're given a complex scientific document. You can read it over and over again. You can become word perfect in its pronunciation. You can be saying even the most complex words, but not understanding what is being said. The understanding of this document would come from further study, sometimes a lifetime of study, studying the different segments, its implications, etc. So too with davening. You can go through the words many times, but if you don't pause to think about them, they are just words. Even if you are a native Hebrew speaker, if you don't think about the spiritual implications, you aren't going to go any deeper than just what is on the page. So let's go through looking at some of these aspects. I'll draw another parallel, that of eating. We all eat, usually 3 times a day, but we don't recount every single meal that we have ever eaten, just certain of the ones that stand out. But of course that doesn't stop us from eating. I could probably recount for you on one hand the number of great meals that included fish and chips, but although I am far from being overweight, that doesn't stop me wanting to eat every day. two concepts there. The constant repetition and making it meaningful. The other concept I deal with is the minyan. The prayer is individual, but has more meaning when prayed within a quorum. Being part of the quorum doesn't exempt you from the individual prayer, but the individual prayer doesn't substitute for the minyan. The minyan is not an orchestra where everyone plays at the same pace. There's certain times, yes, when everyone should be together, but again, this is not mandatory. Some people who know me personally might be asking why on occasions I will be announcing the page. The reasoning behind that would be for those who aren't familiar with the service, perhaps following it in their native language, a language other than Hebrew, just to help them know where the general quorum is at, and to make them feel at home, give them certain familiarity with the prayer book. There's another term used within the praying, that of chazan or shaliach tzibor. Chazan is more understood, but shaliach tzibor would be the public emissary. It would be reasonable to say that every chazan is a shaliach tzibor, but not every shaliach tzibor is a chazan. Chazan, in my mind, being one who has a great voice and can impart great feeling into the prayers. The shaliach tzibor being the representative of the people who would be leading the prayers, keeping a certain pace going, and for instance in the case of the repetition of the Amidah, would actually be the emissary for the people who may not have been able to say the Amidah in Hebrew. The appropriate sections for saying Amen would then cover the congregants because they have given their assent to what has just been said. The other aspect of announcing the pages and the orchestral analogy is regards those who may join in late or have had to take a slight break in the prayers. In my view, one should continue at one's own pace. If it's fast enough to catch up with everyone else, then so be it. But there's no obligation to finish with everyone else. The beginning should be an individual issue, as is the ending. Now, as I pointed out, certain prayers will be said over 1100 times a year, and yet we're told that prayer should not be a routine matter. Not always an easy issue, but further study can imbue new and unique meanings to the words that are being used. Just as I pointed out with the scientific paper, you are only going to understand that scientific paper by further study and reading. The study of Hebrew and its understanding really is a lifetime's occupation. you can come at a new segment, a new word from a totally different angle, and suddenly there's that eureka moment and it takes on a totally new meaning. This study might be through the dictionary, it might be through a study partner, it might even be through a totally unrelated lecture, but suddenly it throws light on a new concept or a new word. Many fine books have been written on this subject. I'm not here to give personal publicity to any one of them, although in feedback I can tell you a few of them, because as I said, there are just so many ways of looking at this. Now ideally one should be familiar enough with Hebrew to be able to pray at any pace with any congregation that you might find yourself with. The other reasonable alternative would be to find a group that you feel comfortable with as regards the speed. That way, if you want to take a long time, and so do they, everyone feels good about it. Other people like to start their morning prayers very early. Others will start later. That's without going into the whole issue of the recommended and ideal times for prayer, which I don't intend to cover here, but as long as you're praying within the overall guidelines, then that's quite alright. And under exceptional circumstances, of course, there are exceptions that are allowed. The other issue that relates to the speed of prayer is the necessity, perhaps forced on you by outside circumstances. Sometimes it might be because of starting work. I had a discussion with someone also regarding prayer in the military, and that certainly is, in my mind, an occasion when you would want to complete your prayers but fulfill one's military obligation, and especially when under attack, obviously through necessity. There's also, in the military context, we're told that before the waters were parted during the Exodus from Egypt, Moses was busy in prayer. But it wasn't until he broke off from his prayers and raised his staff where the waters parted. So prayer can accomplish many things, but we also have to be the instruments of action. Don't pray that someone will heal the sick without using the gifts that are being given by Hashem for healing the sick. And those examples can go on as you think about different aspects. So just to summarize, prayer should always be fresh and anew every day, but there's no excuse for not praying, even if you feel rushed, don't have the time, etc. Even within the prayer time, maybe take a pause, reread a certain section. One interesting aspect, of course, is saying that the prayer should be audible to you, but not to those around you. It's very important that one is praying with one's lips. And at another level, it also helps the concentration. You're concentrating on saying the words, and so one's mind doesn't wander. Because we all know, for instance, especially frequent flyers, you're told to look at the sheet regarding what to do in an emergency. Very easy to pull it out of the pocket, glance at it, go, yeah, I know that, and put it back. Whereas if you are forced to read it, you will actually be going through word by word. We all know small children, when they are learning to read, they will also be reading out loud. Reading to oneself in that context is considered to be quite an achievement. Even more intriguing is how the mind then starts to process the words. There's been a test shown that as long as a word has its first and last letter in place, the intermediate letters can be jumbled, but the mind knows exactly what that word is. In the context of prayer, I'm not going to start the debate of whether that's a good or a bad thing, but again, I address those who don't have Hebrew as their native language. They usually do have to look at words letter by letter. It takes quite a while before they can read with the same proficiency that they can their native language. Sometimes when one is called upon to lead the prayers, that's also a great test of whether one has learnt to pronounce the words correctly. There's always someone stepping in to make the correction. That has been debated whether it is a good or a bad thing, on the basis that you shouldn't be shaming someone in public. But I'll leave that whole debate for another time. But to all native Hebrew speakers, non-native, slowly one can familiarize oneself with the prayers, pray them as they should be prayed, and anyone who does have feedback on this, as I said in my introduction as well, I'll do what I can to help you. The only stupid question, they say, is the one that's never asked. If I can't answer it, I can either refer you to an individual or